Hello and welcome to Art Tarpic, a show where I draw and talk about a specific topic. You can follow along too if you want. Today's topic is going to be drawing your favorite Greek god or goddess. So, talking about Greek gods, you can't not talk about the Greek gods without bringing up the Theogony, which is a compilation of how all the Greek gods and goddesses relate to each other. It was written by some guy named Hesiod around the 3rd to 4th century BC. It is not, however, like the end all be all of the gods because it mentions a lot, it doesn't mention all of them, and also other Greek stories, contradict the Theogony. It's understandable considering that when we think of the Greek, we kind of think of like the ancient Greece as like this, kind of like set time, but ancient Greece it can be like anywhere from like 3000 BC to like 300 BC. So I mean that's over 2700 years. That's more time than you went from zero to now. So yeah, there's a lot of contradictions, but it's still a good starting point. So I'm just gonna kind of go through all and like I might mention some of the Roman names. I might not. Not all of them have Roman names. I'll try to get the ones that do that you might know of, and I also kind of point out a few things of what certain gods do. So, sit back, relax. If you're drawing along with me, that's fine. So, let's get started. Okay, so the Theogony starts off with Hesiod in a field, and he's tending to his sheep, and then for some reason the muses, which are like the like art muses of the like comedy, tragedy, song and whatnot, they show up to Hesiod and decide to tell him all about the history of the gods for some reason. There's not muses. I'm not going to say what the names are because I'm going to butcher a lot of these names. So a lot of these names I'm going to put on the screen. I will say some of them, but a lot of them are just going to be on the screen because a lot of them actually don't really matter. So here on the screen are where the muses' names are. All right. So after that, after they introduce themselves, they start going over all the gods. So the first god is chaos. So chaos just kind of shows up. He doesn't really come from anywhere. He's just kind of there. So chaos is basically it's just kind of like an empty space. It's not like when we think of chaos, we kind of think of disorder, but here chaos is like just like kind of like an empty space. Like it just kind of encapsulates everything. Next up, we have Gaia. Gaia also just kind of shows up. Gaia is the Earth. Gaia does have a Roman name named Terra. You might have heard of that. The next god after that is Tartarus. Tartarus is interesting because, I mean, Gaia's kind of the same way, but Tartarus is both like a thing and a place. And quite a few gods are kind of like that, actually. So, but Tartarus is. I actually kind of get to Tartarus a little bit later when I talk about some other stuff. But Tartarus is kind of like where the underworld is in a sense, but not quite. And then the last one, and then the fourth one, that's similar to the first three, is Eros, or also known as Cupid. That's the Roman name. It's the creator of love. He also just kind of shows up. So these are like kind of like the four primordial gods. They just kind of show up. Everything after this comes from these four. So there's gonna be a lot of inbreeding going on. So have fun with that. All right. Next up is Erebus, also known as darkness. Erebus just comes from chaos. There's also the night, which is Nyx or Nox in Roman. That also just shows up from chaos. And then there's Aether, also known as the lightness. He comes about from Erebus and night. Erebus is male, by the way. Night is female. And then there's day or Hemera. So she also comes from Erebus and Nice. From Erebus and Night. They both come from. So a lot of these kind of have like a bunch of kids all at once. After this is Heaven. Now the interesting about Heaven is actually the name is Uranus or Uranus. And this is our seventh planet in the solar system. Interesting thing about Uranus is that it is the only planet named after the Greek name of a god. All the other planets we have in our solar system, other than not kind of dwarf planets or the Earth, they're named after Roman gods. So the Roman name for Uranus though is Cassius or Caius. So he comes from Gaia. So Uranus becomes like the head honcho at some point. Basically, he's like the guy in charge. So Gaia now has a few more kids after Uranus. She has Pontus, which is the sea, and you have Oceanus, which is also kind of the sea. Pontus is more like the Mediterranean Sea, and then Oceanus is kind of like everything else. So Oceanus is described as the river that wraps around the world, so it's kind of like, like all the oceans, whereas Pontus is, like I said, just the Mediterranean Sea. So after that, we have what is known as the Titans. They're all the descendants of both Gaia and Uranus. So the first one is Coeus or Coeus. Then after that we have Creus. Then after that we have Hyperion. Then Iapetus or Iapetus. Then we have Thea. Then we have Rhea. Rhea is pretty important. All these are pretty important, but Rhea is kind of like more important. Then there's Themis, and then there is Mnemosyne, also known as Moneta, and that's her Roman name. And then we have Phoebe, Theseus, and then the youngest of the group is Kronos, also known as Saturn. So, Saturn is the last of like the Titans. So, but both Uranus and Gaia don't stop there. Afterwards, they have the Cyclops. They have names. I'm gonna post them on the screen too. But the Cyclops are, apart from the one eye, their strength is on par with the gods. The only difference is they have one eye. What makes they're well noted for giving Zeus his thunderbolt that he's known for. Then after that, they got a little weird. Gaia and Uranus have these kids that are considered monstrous kids. They have 100 arms and 50 heads, and Uranus is so disgusted by them that he immediately locked them away in Tartarus to never see the light of day as soon as they were born, because that's how ugly they were. So Gaia didn't like this. She didn't like having her babies locked away like that. So she wanted to get revenge on Uranus, and so she had a plan, and she asked all her kids who would help her out with this plan. Nobody wanted to do it, except for Kronos. He's like, "I'll do it, Mom," and she says, "Okay." So she gives him a dagger, and is like, "All right, here's the plan." And then, so she makes him hide. She calls Uranus over, and she's like, "Hey, I want some more babies." And Uranus is like, "Oh, okay." So he starts doing his business, and then Kronos comes out of nowhere, and kind of like how Yvette comes in to a young dog, a young male dog. Kronos comes in with the knife and slices off Uranus' manhood. So, needless to say, 1, Uranus was upset. 2, blood is everywhere at this point, and it's spilling all over the place. It lands all over Gaia, and when it lands on Gaia, the blood turns into 3 things. The first thing it turns into are the Furies. The second one it turns into are giants. They don't really have any names, there's a bunch of giants. And then the third one are these kind of ash nymphs, which are also just kind of like a race. So they all come from the blood of that event. And then Kronos throws it, so Kronos takes the severed manhood and throws it into the sea. And then for some reason, it bubbles up, and out comes Aphrodite from that, also known as Venus. So yeah, that's where Aphrodite came from. So I'm gonna take a moment here to state that the Theogony they kind of jump around a bunch between different gods. So the first, like for instance, we just finished Titans. We're not gonna get back to Titans for a while, so they do tend to jump around a lot. So I'm just kind of following along with how it's ordered. So if you're wondering why I'm keep jumping around, that's why. But next we're gonna talk about Night. So Night has like a ton of kids. They're all kind of dark, like doom and death. I'm gonna put them all up on the screen so you can see them. There's an interesting one called Friendship though. I just found it a little interesting. You got like these really dark stuff, and then you got like Friendship. But yeah, she starts popping out a bunch of kids. The last one she has is named Strife in the Theogony. However, she also her Greek name is known as Eris, which if you're fans of Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, you may know Eris as the goddess of chaos. So it's kind of what she does here as well. She's most well known for her role in the Iliad, where she gives a guy named Paris a golden apple, and basically goes up to the three goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, and tells her, and basically has him pick which one's the prettiest. And as you can probably guess, it didn't go well. So she's well known for that. So that's kind of what her golden apple is based off of. Another thing I want to mention here is the Fates. The Fates are interesting for two reasons. One in context of the Theogony, another one in context in kind of pop culture. So in Disney's Hercules, if you've seen that movie, Hades is always conferring with the Fates. Those are the Fates. The names are Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. So they come from Night. For now, anyway. They're gonna kind of show up again later. It's coming from someplace else. I'm not sure why. I don't know why it contradicts itself, but yeah. However, the Fates aren't. The Fates don't actually, like the Fates in Hercules are actually kind of based off of something else I want to talk about a little bit later. Yeah. But that's what the Fates are. So, Eris also starts popping out kids. I want to put those up on the screen as well. So they get really dark too. So that's all her kids. All right. So next we're going to talk about Nereus, which is the son of Pontus and Gaia. He is considered the old man of the sea, and he does not lie. He also has a ton of kids that we're going to get to soon. Next we got Thomas and Phorcys. So after this we have Ceto and Eurybia. So then Nereus has some kids with someone named Doris, who I'm going to get to Doris later. But they have 50 daughters. And I'm just going to put their names on the screen because there's a lot of them. Most of them aren't important. There are a few I want to mention though. The first one is Amphitrite, because we're going to talk about her a little bit later. Thetis, she is the mother of Achilles in the Iliad. So she's going to be mentioned a little bit later. And then there is another Doris in here. It's a different Doris. Some of the names do get repeated, especially in the smaller ones. Someone named Haley. I just thought it was interesting. It's more like a normal name. And then there's another daughter named like Samantha, but it's spelled a little weird, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. But yeah, all those are mentioned because they have kids. The other ones don't. That's why I didn't mention them. So then Thalamus, which is Nerea's brother, he has a kid with someone named Electra, who I'm also going to get to later, named Iris. and they also have some harpy daughters. All right, and then Seto and Forsyth, they were kind of like they're kind of like all the monsters you see in like Greek mythology are kind of like they come from her, or they come from both of them. Mostly they come from somebody else who comes from them, but I'm gonna talk about her a little bit later. So the first thing they have is something called the gray. These are what you when you think of like the fates from Disney's Hercules. Basically, that's what these are, or how they act. There's 2 to 3 of them. Theogony there's only 2 of them, but in other texts there's 3. They all share one eye and one tooth, which is kind of like how the fates are, except like these aren't the fates, but that characteristic is carried over and used for the fates in Hercules. Next after that, from 7 Forsyth, we have the Gorgons. There's 3 of them. There is Steno, Uriel, and Medusa. Medusa's a little interesting because she was considered mortal. And then she was also a human that had the unfortunate. I'm going to talk about Medusa in a later video, but Medusa kind of had there's a basic overview. Medusa kind of had the unfortunate mishap of being beautiful and having Poseidon notice her. And so he was like, "Hey girl, you're beautiful. I was like, how about you get with some of this?" And she's like, "Nah, I don't want it." And Poseidon's like, "No one says no to me." And so yeah, the way to treat women in Greek mythology is not very good, as we're going to see a little bit later. But so yeah, after Poseidon was done with Medusa, Medusa was not happy about it, and for some reason she was in I forgot why, but she was in Athena's temple when this happened. So I don't know why they were in Athena's temple, but Athena was mad that she wasn't grateful that Poseidon would even think that Poseidon even wanted to do with her in the first place. So she turned her into the snake. So that's how Medusa became a snake. And then there's some more stuff like the Hesperides. They also come from 7 Forsyth. And then it kind of talks about so after Perseus kills Medusa, which spoilers, Perseus kills Medusa. When he slices off her head, some of you may know, he uses her as a kind of like a weapon where he sticks her on a shield and whatnot. But what you also may not know is that when her head got chopped off, out popped out 2 flying horses. The first one that you may know of is Pegasus. The second one you may not know of is Chrysaor. I'm not going to talk about Pegasus because I mean he does do stuff in Greek mythology, but in terms of like having kids, Pegasus doesn't have any. Chrysaor has a bunch, so we're going to talk about him a little bit later. But yeah, they come out of Medusa when her head gets chopped off. And then speaking of Chrysaor, Chrysaor has a kid with someone named Calirior. I don't know how to pronounce it, but yeah, it's called like the Grayon. It's killed by Hercules later. And then the one I want, another important one, not by it's by Saturn Forsyth again, is somebody named Echidna. Echidna is she is a half nymph, half snake lady. It kind of sounds like Medusa in a way. However, she has, instead of like one snake tail, like she kind of has 2 like legs. So she has like 2 like snake leg tails. She's considered like the mother of monsters, and a lot of monsters do come from Echidna. For instance, she has kids with somebody named Typhoon, who I'm going to talk about later. And with Typhoon, she has a kid named Orthus Cerberus, which you've all heard of Cerberus, the Hydra of Lerna, and the Chimera. With Orthus, the first kid, she has the Sphinx and the Nemean lion. Yeah, those are some considered some monsters. So next after this we have the Oceanids. There's a few of them. Actually, there's a lot of them. There's over 3,000 of them. But there's a few of them I want to talk about specifically. I won't. I'm not going to say most of them. I want to mention a few of them, and I want to post them on the screen. So, but a few I want to draw attention to is Electra, who I talked about. She's an Oceanid. So all the Oceanids are the children of Tethys and Oceanus. So we have Electra, Doris, someone named Clymene, which I haven't talked about yet. Caliro, which is the Oceanid that had the kid with Chrysor. Pluto, I want to mention. There's nothing remarkable about Pluto, but Pluto is not the same Pluto that you're thinking of. Some others are Perseus, Metis, Euronome, Calypso, and Styx. So, these are basically personifications of rivers. Not all of them, but most of them are. For instance, Styx, you heard the river Styx. And that's that river that you gotta cross to get to the underworld. So, she's a daughter of Tethys and Oceanus, but it's also kind of like an actual thing as well. So, then Thea and Hyperion, which are two of the Titans, they have 3 kids. They have someone named Helios, also known as Sol, that's the Roman name, which is the sun. Selene, or Luna, is the Roman name, also known as the moon. And Eos, or the Roman name is known as Aurora, which is the dawn. And then Eurbia and Creus, they have 3 kids, Australis, Pallas, and Persis. Australis and Eos have 2 kids named Zephyrus and Boreas. These are considered good winds. There's like good winds and bad winds. So these 2 are good winds. Later on, I'm going to talk about a few bad winds. So then, Styx and Pallas have 4 kids named Zealous, Nike, Kratos with a C, not with a K, and Bia. So Nike, in this case, means victory. That's pretty sure what it means. The company's named after it. So this is where Nike got his name from, probably. Then Phoebe and Coeus had 2 kids named Leto and Asteria. And then Astrea and Persis, which are the 2 kids I talked about, they had a kid named Hecate. Now, for some reason, she had a huge section about her in the Theogony. Basically, she was the only child. Zeus loved her for some reason, and by love, I don't mean like want to have babies with. I just mean like he respected her immensely. When I looked into it, apparently it's she's kind of like the goddess of like tradition and whatnot. So it was a big deal. So if you pray to her, you can receive good fortune, but she can also easily take your back if you kind of like get on her bad side. So people kind of people pray to her a lot. Now I'm going to talk about Kronos and Rhea. They start having kids, and these are kids that you should know. Is where we start getting to the big names. Now, Kronos, after he defeated Uranus, he didn't actually free the kids that Uranus locked away for whatever reason. He didn't want to. So Gaia is like, well then, if you're not going to release them, one of your kids is going to overthrow you. And Kronos is like, yeah, right. I'm not going to let that happen. So, him and Rhea start pumping out some kids here. And each time she gives birth, he eats the kid. Now, from what I read, it said his son's going to overtake him, so I don't know why he eats the girls. But, yeah, so each time Rhea has a kid, he eats the kid. So, first kid he eats is Hesiod. Her Roman name is Vesta. It's the gods of the hearth. Next kid he eats is Demeter or Ceres. Next one after that is Hera or Juno. It's a Roman name. Next after that we start having the boys. We have Hades, also known as Pluto. So this is the Roman Pluto. Poseidon, also known as Neptune. And then the last one is Zeus, also known as Jupiter. Now Zeus, now they fawn over him in the Theogony, like it says, Zeus is most excellent among the gods and supreme in power, which I thought was kind of interesting. But so at this point, Rhea's like, you know what? I don't want him to eat my. So before she has Zeus, Rhea says, you know what? I don't want Kronos eating all my kids. I don't like it. So she goes up to Gaia, and she's like, Gaia, I don't want Kronos eating all my kids. What do I do? So Gaia's all like, I got an idea. You're gonna take Zeus. You're gonna hide him away. I got a nice hiding spot for him. And then you're gonna take his clothes and take this rock and dress it up in his clothes. And then give the rock to Kronos. So Rhea's like, oh, okay. So she dresses up the rock in swaddling clothes, so basically it's wrapped up in the blanket, and it's like, here you go, Kronos. And Kronos, for some reason, wasn't like, man, this baby weighs a ton, like a rock. He's like, it's fine, and he eats it. And so he thinks he's all good, and he's in the clear. But actually, Zeus is just kind of hiding in the shadows, getting stronger and growing up. So some time passes, and then he comes back, and he's like, Kronos, I'm gonna overthrow you. You're being a real jerk. You know my siblings. So Kronos is like, oh yeah, why don't you make me? So they start fighting. Zeus gets the thunderbolt from the Cyclops and whatnot. He defeats Kronos, and he sends every single Titan to Tartarus, except for some of them, which he decided not to. Mostly the women, for whatever reason. They're allowed to stay. So, there's actually mostly just like the male Titans. So, yeah, so they got sent to Tartarus. And I couldn't figure out if Zeus actually releases the monster kids or not. I think he does, but I'm not sure. But anyway, so after that we have some of the kids at Opposites, who was a Titan, and Clemenine, who is an Oceanid had. The first one is Atlas. He's the guy that holds up the Earth. Then we have Menoetius, or that's pronounced, I don't know. Prometheus, which you might have heard before, and Epimetheus. So I want to talk about Prometheus and Epimetheus first. Actually, I'm going to only talk about him. So Prometheus is known as the creator of man in Greek mythology, and he was very pro men. And when I say men, I mean men. I don't mean women. Women didn't exist. Prometheus only made men. He didn't make any women. So when I talk about men, I actually mean men. I'll get the women later. And Epimetheus was known for marrying the first woman, who I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Now this also goes into a story about how Zeus punishes Prometheus for disobeying him and usually giving stuff to humans by strapping him to a rock and having an eagle pick out his liver every day to have it grow back and do it again. I don't know why they put that here, because after this, they go into before that. So I don't know why they stuck it out there. But it's so first they start talking about how two things got created. First one being why they sacrifice to the gods, and the second one being why women exist in the first place. Which for all you ladies out there, it's not exactly it's not exactly going to be kind to women. Like I said before, ancient Greece was not did not exactly have a strong opinion and did not exactly have a good opinion of women. So the first one I'll talk about is the sacrifices. So when they were doing so at one point the men and the gods were having a feast, and at this point it was still just men. And Prometheus was in charge of splitting the meat. So Prometheus, being pro men, decided, I'm gonna give all the good stuff to the men and give all the bad stuff to the gods. So he split all the meat into basically one pile was meat, one pile was bones. And he knew Zeus wasn't gonna be like, hey. So he knew Zeus wasn't gonna like take a line down. So he covers the meat in ox stomach and covers the bones in fat. And in ancient Greece, basically stuff that had more fat on it was usually considered good. So Zeus is like, hey, Prometheus, get over here. I noticed that you have two piles of uneven portions here. And Prometheus is like, yeah. And Zeus is like, what are you trying to pull? And he's like, listen, Zeus, if you think I'm trying to pull anything, that's fine. I'll let you choose which pile which pile I give to the humans, to the men. So Zeus is like, okay. He sees the fat, and he's like, I'm gonna go for the fat one. I can have that. They can have the ox stomach. So Prometheus is like, oh, okay. And then Zeus starts biting into it, and realizes that he's been bamboozled, and it's like, oh, that's Prometheus. And he's like, fine, okay. You can have the meat. It's like the men can have the meat, but that means I want like every year or whatever. I want sacrifice of bones as punishment. Seems a little weird, saying he didn't want the bones, so he's like, all right, I want to give all the bones, but whatever. So yeah, that's why they do sacrifices. Next one is how women got created. So the gods had fire while men didn't. And Prometheus is like, but I want men to have fire. But the gods didn't want men to have fire. So Prometheus kind of took some fire and hid it away in like a fennel stalk, gave it to the men. And Zeus found out about it because he was like looking off on the horizon, and he's like, what's that glow over there? There shouldn't be a glow over there. So he goes over there, realizes men now have fire, and he's like, there's only one person that can do this, Prometheus. So then he's like, all right, men, you can have fire, but the punishment, I want to give you something. I want to give you like a really cool punishment. So he gets Athena and Hephaestus, and he tells those two, it's like, listen, I want you to basically make a man, but the opposite. And so they were like, okay. So both Athena and Hephaestus end up making a woman called Pandora, who I'm not gonna get into Pandora now. I'm gonna get into Pandora later, but she's considered the first woman, so she ends up marrying Epimetheus. But yeah, so Zeus. So basically, they created her, and Zeus decided to give her two curses, or basically create two curses for man. These aren't like, this isn't like a Pandora's box kind of thing. This is kind of like nature of women, according to Zeus in ancient Greece. So the first one was Zeus made women to be an evil to mortal men, with a nature to do evil. That was the words given. So apparently, women can only be evil, according to the Theogony. The other curse was if you decided to avoid the evils of woman, then you will grow old at some point, and the second curse kicks in, and the fact that you have nobody to take care of you when you're old. So those are the two different curses. So really kind of anti-women, honestly. The other, and then the last, there's another one here where it basically said, if you're married, you gotta keep fighting evil, and if your kids grow up to be basically losers, you gotta live with that, and it can't be undone. So basically, don't have loser kids. Actually, in my notes here, I did write it in my notes, but he does free the monster. Zeus does free the monster kids. In fact, that's actually how to defeat Kronos. I forget I wrote that in there. But so after that, it kind of goes over how where everybody lives and everything's made up of. And then so it kind of says like Styx is next to the underworld, and that's where Hades lives, and stuff like that. And then it also mentions somebody named Simopolia, who is the daughter of Poseidon. The only thing that's really interesting about that is the fact that she's only mentioned in this in the Theogony. She's not mentioned in like in literally anything else. So that's why I kind of do a little bit mention to her. All right, and then the Earth has one last kid. It happened after Zeus drives the Titans out. She has a kid. The Earth has a kid with Tartarus, and name is, and this is where Typhoon comes from. And so Typhoon's pretty evil, and he ends up fighting. So Zeus and Typhoon end up fighting, and then Zeus shoves Typhoon down to Tartarus. So Typhoon's known for creating a lot of wind. There's a lot of when see a lot of wind around. Sometimes people call it typhoon. So all the wind that comes from him is bad. So yeah, so that's where all the bad wind comes from. Now, the two good winds from earlier, they're not part of that. So like good wind would be something like if you want to sail towards something, the good wind would help you sail towards it, whereas the bad wind would make you sail away from it. So that's what it means by good wind. All right. So now I'm gonna go over the many wives of Zeus. And Zeus has a lot of wives, and this is not including all the affairs he has. So Zeus has 7 wives. First wife is Metis. Metis was an Oceanid, if you remember that. And interesting thing about Metis is that the Earth comes in, and she's all like, "Hey Zeus, I got another prophecy for you." And Zeus is like, "Oh jeez." And so she was like, "Guess what? You're gonna have a kid. You're gonna actually have 2 kids with Metis. You're gonna have a boy and a girl, and they're gonna be smart, a little too smart. They're gonna try to take over." And I'm just letting you know that. So Zeus is like, "Well, I don't want to get cast off of my throne." So he's like, "Well, what could I do?" And for some reason, Zeus decides, you know what? That eating strategy that my dad had was a good idea. I'm going to try that, but I want to be smart this time. I'm not eating the kids as soon as they come out because that didn't work out great for my dad. I'm going to eat the mom. But I'm going to eat the mom before she even gets pregnant with the first kid. So he eats Metis. But you may be wondering how to eat a full grown woman. But it doesn't say in the Theogony, but I looked it up, and it turns her into a fly. He tricks her to turn into a fly, and then she does it. And then she flies into his mouth somehow. So he eats her. Little does he know, though, and it's kind of part of the things with Greek mythology in terms of fate. Really can't get past fate. It's like one of the things that even the gods can't really get past. So if something's fated to happen, it's going to happen. Although this one's a little weird in the fact it doesn't quite happen. But so anyway, she goes inside of him, but she's pregnant. So we're gonna put a pin in that one for later. But right now she's pregnant. So then he has a second wife, her name is Themis. I talked about her a little earlier. She has a bunch of stuff. She has the Hooray, I'm gonna put them up on the screen. I can't really read them, but I'm gonna butcher every single one of them. However, this is also where the fates mentioned again. I don't know why they're mentioned again, because first it came from Night. Now they're telling me to come from this lady. So yeah, I'm not really sure about that. I tried to look it up to see what it, and like it said it come from both. I'm like, okay then. So I don't really get that one. Next after that we have Euronome. She has a daughter. She has some kids with Zeus, all known as the Graces. There's three of them. I want to put their names on the screen. I'm gonna screw all of them up except for probably Thalia, but yeah. So Zeus has kids with those. Then Zeus has a daughter with Demeter named Persephone. Her Roman name is Proserpine, or I'm gonna put it up on the screen. I keep screwing it up, but yeah, that's Persephone. This one's a little weird. She is the wife of Hades, who it wasn't quite mentioned in here. It was mentioned some other guy married her, which I heard could be another name for Hades. It's a little weird, but yeah. So she married Hades, and what's interesting about her is she's actually the reason why we have seasons, because of Demeter. Basically, Hades tricked her into eating this fruit of the underworld, which means she had to live there. But they ended up working out some deal with Demeter, where she only goes there for about half the year, and then she comes back. So when she's leaving and going to the underworld, it comes fall. While she's living in the underworld, it's winter. When she comes back, basically Demeter's all happy, and then spring and summer happen. So that's how we have seasons. Then Zeus marries Mnemosyne, which is one of the early gods to talk about, and she has the Muses with Zeus, who I mentioned way early on. Then Leto and Zeus have kids. She has two kids. She has Apollo and Artemis. They're considered twins. Apollo doesn't have a Roman name. It's just Apollo. Artemis does have a Roman name. Her name is Diana. So, yeah. So those are those two. And then we finally get to Hera, which is usually known as the wife of Zeus because she's the last one. So Hera has three kids: Hebe, Ares, also known as Hebe, Ares, also known as Mars, and Elysia. All right, and so yeah, so those are the 7 wives of Zeus. So after all of this happened, remember Metis from earlier, the first wife. Well, she finally gave birth to a daughter named Athena, also known as Minerva in Rome. Now sometimes she's called Pallas Athena. I think Pallas is like a title, but it could be either or. So anyway, so Athena's still inside of Zeus, and then one day I've seen various things of this. Sometimes Zeus has a headache, and then he has his head split open. Sometimes he just kind of forces her out anyway. One that I saw once, I might be misremembering it, but it was basically like Hera said, Zeus, I can have kids and you can't. And Zeus was like, oh yeah, watch this. And then he kind of like splits his head open, and out comes out Athena, who everywhere I've seen her the birth like Athena, always comes out as always like fully clothed, and it's like an adult and like fully clothed. I'm like, oh okay. So I was thought it was interesting that they kind of mentioned that. So yeah, if you can't tell, that's what my picture's about here. Now Athena's not usually depicted with wings. I thought it looked kind of cool. That's why I wanted the wings on it. So I gave her owl wings because she's normally depicted with owls. So that's why the wings look like that. So anyway, Hera got mad that Zeus had a kid without her, which I don't know why. He had like 6 wives before her. So she got mad and had a kid named Hephaestus, also known as Vulcan. It's basically where the name the volcanoes come from. So that's all the kids of Zeus for right now anyway. Next we're going to talk about Poseidon. Poseidon had a kid with one of Nereus' sons named Amphitrite. She had a kid named Triton, which you remember from the Little Mermaid. That's that guy. So, now there's Ariel's family tree for you. And then Aphrodite and Ares had 2 kids named Panic and Fear, also known as Deimos and Phobos, which is the Greek name for it. They're the moons of Mars. So, similar to Pain and Panic from Disney's Hercules with Hades, except there's no pain as far as I know. And then Aphrodite and Ares also have one more kid named Harmonia, also known as Concordia in the Roman version. I don't think I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about Eris, but Eris' Roman name is Discordia. So they tend to be considered opposites. So Harmonia and Eris are considered opposites. And then Atlas has a daughter named Maya. Maya has a kid with Zeus named Hermes, also known as Mercury. So one of Zeus's extramarital affairs. And then there's another kid named Semele, where Harmonia and Cadmus, who is this random guy, they have a kid. So they have a kid named Semele. Semele is considered mortal. And Semele and Zeus have another kid named Dionysus or Bacchus, basically the god of partying pretty much. And then Zeus has an affair again with Almena or Almena. That's where Hercules comes from. Actually, the thing about Hercules, though, Hercules is actually the Roman name. The Greek name for Hercules is Heracles. So, I'm not gonna be that guy and keep calling him Heracles for the rest of it, but yeah, if you want to be accurate, Heracles is actually the correct name when talking about Greek mythology. And then Dionysus had a kid with someone named Minos. It was just some random lady named Arjune. And then Perseus, who was one of the Oceanids, and Helios, also known as the sun. They have 2 kids named Circe and Aedes, and someone named Anidia. I think she was an Oceanid as well. They have a kid named Medea. Would you ever read Jason and the Argonauts? Is that Medea? And now we're gonna get to we're gonna get to like the kind of the last round here, which is all the kids between goddesses and mortal men. First one is Plutus, who is the son of Demeter and some guy named Aeson. Harmonia and Cadmus had a few more kids, also known as Ino, Agave, Autonoe, and Polydorus. Eos, also known as the Dawn, and some guy named Tithonus had a kid named Memnon, also known as King of the Ethiopians. Now, Ethiopians is an interesting term because we think of them as an African country. But in ancient Greece, Ethiopians were basically anybody who lived at the edge of the world. So, I guess they got to Ethiopia and they were like, hey, you know what? That's the edge of the world for us. So, yeah, so the word Ethiopian in ancient Greece, that's what it means. It means somebody who lives at the edge of the world. Alright, and we got someone named Pathon, which is also between Eos and someone named Cephalus. Medius is someone between Jason and Medea. Someone named Focus with a PH. Someone between Samantha and someone named Acus. Achilles, which is the kid of Thetis in Peleus, and then Aeneas, which is the child of Aphrodite and some guy named Anchius. Alright, so another three are the children between Circe and Odysseus. Uh, and Odysseus is the guy in the Odyssey. He's the main character in there. He's also in the Iliad as well, but he's the main character in the Odyssey. He has three kids with her named Agrias, Latinus, and then Theogony. And interesting fact about Odysseus actually is his Roman name is called Ulysses, like Ulysses S. Grant. And then the last two kids are between Odysseus and Calypso. I'm just gonna put them up on the screen because I can't really pronounce them. But so that is every god and goddess in the Theogony. The Theogony reads like a long list, and honestly, a lot of information isn't in it. This is because in ancient Greece, people tend to be well acquainted with the stories already. So when you're reading a myth, the myth assumes you know who most of the characters are and what they do. That's why at the end of the Theogony, they just kind of start dumping like a whole bunch of names on you from other myths because it's kind of like, oh, yeah, by the way, this is how your favorite heroes like Perseus or Hercules, this is how they relate to the gods. So I still think, even though it's hard to read, it's still a good reference when you're reading other Greek myths because you can come back to it and say, oh, I remember this guy, and I remember this guy. This is how they relate, and it can make the story feel like it kind of adds a little bit more to the story. And another thing I really like about it as well is it kind of shows how the ancient Greeks saw different concepts. For instance, for Oceanus, Oceanus is the river. If you remember from before, it was the river around that kind of encapsulates the world. He has kids. It says 3,000 kids, and all those kids are just basically names of rivers. So you can kind of view it as Oceanus, like all rivers come from the ocean. You can also see it with night, where a lot of bad stuff happens on night, but also like sleep and dreams, those also come from night. I'm not quite sure how they got friendship from night, but it's just really interesting to see kind of like where certain things come from. But some of the stuff in the Theogony, like I mentioned before, isn't that particularly great. Mainly, its portrayal of women. It was kind of par for the course around that time, though. Unfortunately, equal rights is something more of a modern concept, but we are talking about over 2,000 years ago. So a lot of the views they had at the time are just now outdated. Not just in Greek mythology, but just like in stuff like science, where, like for instance, medicine they thought disease was caused by imbalances in your body from four things that don't exist. So you can kind of expect some inaccuracies. But on the flip side, we have some things that are actually kind of still around. For instance, some of the things that gods are associated for, we kind of still associate with things associated with those gods. For instance, Athena, she's a goddess of a few things, namely wisdom. That's her main one that people tend to know her for. But she's also the goddess of war, which is similar to Ares. Ares is the god of war, but war more towards of kind of like brute strength, not like any kind of mind to it. So where Athena is more about strategic warfare, since she deals with wisdom. However, Athena is also usually closely associated with owls. I'm not sure if that's a Greek construct. I know it's definitely a Roman one, there's a Roman story involving an owl and Athena, but she tends to get associated with some owls, and actually, there's a certain owl species that actually, like, the Latin name for it has Athena in it. That's called like a little owl. Like this was actually called little owl, so a small owl. But yeah, so Athena is considered like a wise goddess, and owls are usually considered wise as well. So wouldn't be surprised if that connection is drawn between both Athena, drawn between Athena and the owl. So that's why owls are usually considered kind of wise. And there's some other stuff that you can kind of pull from some of the other gods too. So I do want to make a quick mention about this picture that I'm drawing, or that I have drawn, since this is post commentary. But the prompt today was draw your favorite Greek god or goddess. Now Athena, I do like her, even though she is kind of a jerk in almost everything she's in. I wouldn't necessarily say she's my favorite goddess, though. There's one that I really like, though it's more Roman. That is the Roman goddess, the goddess of the wheat supply to Rome. I really like it because it's more personification. It'd be like if the U.S. had we still made like gods or goddesses for certain concepts, and we made a goddess of the oil supply to the U.S. That's basically what the goddess of the wheat supply to Rome is, because the wheat supply to Rome is super important. So they would want to pray to it. I just like how very specific it is. It's just like, oh, this is the goddess of wisdom. This is the god of war. This is the god of the ocean. This is the god of wine. This is the goddess of the wheat supply, not just in general, but specifically to this one city. So I find that funny, but she's not necessarily a Greek god, nor is she really considered like an actual god. She's more like a concept, kind of like in the U.S. Another example would be the Statue of Liberty. It's not a real person. We don't worship her. She really doesn't have any backstory. She's just kind of like represents liberty. So that's really all the wheat supply, the gods of wheat supply to Rome is. But I just had to go with Athena, the birth of Athena, because I thought I was more interested in anyway. So that's all the time we have for today. I hope you all learned something about Greek mythology. If you want to read the Theogony for yourself, it is public domain. You can find it online. I'll put a link to the one that I was reading down in the description. There are different kind of versions for it, because there's different kind of translations. So for this video, I had to actually look up a few other translations as well, because some of these, like, they have different names, they're spelled differently, or like it doesn't have, or they kind of take some stuff out. So usually each version's different. So I'll see you all next time, and have a good day, and goodbye.